Welcome to episode 3 of the Building Minds podcast. Today, we're going to be joined with Zane McCormack, who is a specialist in burnout prevention. He's a burnout prevention coach who previously spent 16 years in the police force. Prior to that, was playing rugby and actually moved from New Zealand to play rugby in England. As you may have realised, I've mentioned this is episode 3 of the podcast. Episode 2 was recorded quite some time ago, but out of respect for our guests, we have decided not to air the episode until further notice. Mental health and mental well-being of our guests are the most important thing, and out of respect to them, as mentioned, we will be putting this on hold until further notice. We wish you well, and hopefully we can get this episode out soon. Zane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Right, thanks for the invite, guys.
No problem at all. So for those of you who don't know, Zane is a burnout prevention coach. And obviously we've had a few heavy episodes released, and we thought it would be a real good idea to get an expert on to talk a little bit about burnout, and hopefully we can prevent some of the issues that we've had previously and spoke about. So I suppose, Zane, lovely to meet you first of all. Thank you for coming on. Do you mind giving us a little bit of a backstory from yourself, how you got to becoming a burnout coach and stuff like that?
Right, yeah, like I say, my accent's not local, so I came out to the UK 25 years ago now, playing rugby, travelling, and doing that. Met my now ex-wife, got married, had kids, realised I couldn't spend the rest of my life messing around playing at it, so nearly 20 years ago I joined the police here. I had 16 years with Devon and Cornwall Police and left the police 3 years ago to set up what I'm doing now as a burnout prevention coach. I think that's quite important to get that across. This is not about dealing with it once you're in the midst of it. This is all about making sure that people aren't burning out. Really started with me was 2020. I had my own little issue with burnout. I collapsed. I had a medical episode on the way to work as a police officer. And I talk a lot about that with the work I do. But what it essentially did was it dropped me on my backside quite spectacularly. And with policing, I was very, very fortunate that I was able to get in front of some people very, very quickly. But the problem I had is that the main focus had been on a couple of particular jobs I dealt with leading up to my episode. While that was fine, what happened was I came back and then got myself caught in that typical burnout loop where I pulled away from work. Came back, had a few months back, started feeling a little unwell again, went off, and probably could have been caught in that loop indefinitely if it hadn't been for someone different than I spoke to the second time around, who very, very quickly identified that it wasn't the last couple of episodes that had been the focus of the first time I'd gone off, and that the last 10 years had been the problem, that with everything that had been going on at home, right, and with work, and that's very important to get that distinction as well, because policing hadn't changed. Policing had been what it was. It's a stressful job, but I'd make the point that policing doesn't have the mortgage on stress. I'm talking to two guys in construction with deadlines and and everything that you guys manage, so I don't have to stress that point. But for me, the issue had been that I just had no respite from the stress, and so once that had been identified, and for me, like I say, it took 6 months from my moment to hearing the actual word burnout, which was quite and which is quite normal for this sort of situation.
Did you identify that yourself, that you burnt out, or did a medical professional?
No, a medical professional. Like I say, at the time I had no idea what was going on, and you put yourself in the hands of the professional, don't you, when you're in these sorts of crises. But it was only when I heard the word burnout that everything made sense. Because what she'd done is she just literally pulled apart the last 10 years and looked at all that. And once I had that diagnosis, everything made sense and everything started falling into place and put in motion the wheels to where I am today. So I left the police 2 years after that to do what I'm doing now.
So let's dig into them 10 years then that you just said, where you got that label of you burnt out. What caused that burnout over them 10 years?
I think with it, it's the whole that stress rest scenario, and I just didn't really have a part of my life that was giving me any respite from what was going on. Young family, issues at home, and everything else that was going on. I'm not looking to put a blame or anything on any one particular part of it, but it's just life, and my story isn't unique. But what it did do was the uniqueness to my situation is that I was also 12,000 miles away from home as well. So not really having that that place I could go and recharge. So everything just sort of built up over the years. Ironically, literally the morning before I had my moment, I had someone who was close to me at the time had asked me if I was okay, and I dropped the 4-letter F word on her and told her I was fine. And it wasn't bravado. It wasn't me trying to sort of push anything under the carpet. I genuinely thought I was okay. Everything had finally been resolved in regards to my personal situation. There's a massive big fat line had been drawn under that, and I was in a position to move forward. I think what also had happened though is my body had just been waiting for a safe moment, to finally stop me and get me to start taking some action.
At that time, how did you feel though? Did you feel okay mentally? Obviously, especially in that period where you've collapsed and you're unsure what's going on, you're getting tested.
No, I was particularly unwell. I had 10 days where I can quite comfortably say I was probably more unwell than a lot of people I sectioned as a police officer during my time. Yeah, I had 10 days. To me, it felt like about 3. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. When it happened, what had happened was I'd been driving to work and had taken a phone call.
Right.
So I'd pulled over for the take the phone call. I don't know what was said on the phone call, but all I remember is this massive feeling of just everything opening up under me in a big vortex, sucking me in. And then just being spun around for the next 10 days. I remember going and having a meeting with a GP, an appointment with a GP. Bearing in mind, this was February 2020. Everything was coming. So I remember sitting in a GP consultancy room with a very nervous-looking GP, frantically washing her hands, sitting on the other side of the office, pushing me out the door as fast as she could. I had a meeting with Occy Health, where they informed me that I'd topped out on a post-traumatic stress test after some bits and pieces that had gone on. And I remember going mute and scaring the crap out of an Occy Health nurse, who was frantically tapping away on the computer, making notes and making some phone calls. I remember having a conversation with the police rehabilitation centre and being told I was too unwell for them, that they were a rehabilitation centre. They didn't deal with acute psychiatric issues. And that was, and I'm having all these moments where, and the big thing with burnout as well is time blindness. So I had no idea about time frames with everything that was going on. So all this was going on. I'm only getting these times now from my diary, from looking back on it all. And at the same time, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I was at home, quite isolated with everything with that. And there was a moment about 10 days into it where everything sort of just stopped, and I sort of snapped back, and it was almost like Thanos snapping his fingers and everything just changing, and realizing I was in a bit of a pickle. But what it also did, it was just a massive moment of clarity. I spoke about this quite a lot, and it happened on a motorway overbridge, and it wasn't anything untoward. There was no sort of, I wasn't in any danger with that. But I just found myself stood there on a bridge. What I'd also been doing was walking. I'd been waking up every morning, well, not waking up, but getting up, sort of tamping and just needing to go and do something. So I was just walking. And I just found myself looking at, sort of stand there with the cars going, and then thinking to myself that 6 months previous, I'd been on a motorway overbridge for work, getting somebody off. And it wasn't unusual with the area that I worked. We had the M5 running through my patch. And I just had this sort of massive, overwhelming realisation that I'd been getting bounced around all these professionals, sort of, GPs and Occy Health and the rest of it, and, therapists and the such. And that the amount of times when I'd been on motorway bridges with people that were in similar crisis, and when they were in crisis, it had been me that had been turning up to try and sort out what was going on. And I just had this overwhelming thought that the person I needed was already there, and that was me. That moment was when everything just stopped. Everything just felt like the waters just receded, and I was just left there going, I was back in the room again going, right, what just happened with that? One thing I hadn't done, I hadn't been eating, I hadn't been during this 10 days. So I walked back to where I was living, walked past the Tesco Express, picked up 2 massive steaks, cooked those up when I got home, had those, and then had the first night's sleep in probably a long, long time. So I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no plan, had nothing, but I knew that I needed to be the one that was sorting it out. Yeah. And everything sort of, and that's when everything started moving forward. That's when the dam felt like it had burst.
Obviously, you come from New Zealand. Do you feel like if you were in New Zealand and you went through the same sort of experience, you would have sort of led to burnout? I'm just interested to think about different cultures and things like that in terms of, do you reckon it'd be slightly different?
I don't know, because the situations would have been very, very different. And I can't say. Well, what I would say is I probably would have had stronger support networks there. And a lot of the work I do is around personal connections, making sure that those are rock solid. And it wasn't that mine weren't rock solid. I just didn't really have them, would be the honest. And being, but the other stress I had as well was not wanting to worry anybody at home as well.
Yeah.
So I couldn't ring up family and say, look, I'm really struggling, because what can they do? You don't want to worry your family or your friends,
especially when they're 12,000 miles away. They feel hopeless and
Yeah.
things like that, and
Yeah.
you think it's just adding that pressure on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it's the pressures, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got your pressure from your industry, from your work, social, family, and then you got the pressure of you living 12,000 miles away from your birth country. You've got all that support there, but you don't want to put the pressure on them.
Yeah.
Which
And the big thing with burnout as well is that everyone's story is different, and everyone's reasons they end up where they are personal to them, which is why a lot of I talk about is that all these cookie cutter solutions that are out there just don't work.
Can you do me a favour? Can you describe what to you burnout means?
Burnout's just exhaustion. It just means that you're exhausted and your brain is exhausted. And what happens when your brain gets exhausted, it just loses the ability to rationalize, to contextualize, to sort of feel safe, and it just winds down. So what happens is it's all brain chemistry, and your brain's no different to a muscle. So if you're at a gym every day, smashing that muscle, doing max lifts every day, PBs, after a while you're going to get injured. Your muscle's going to start.
Sure.
So I'd say burnout is just exhaustion, and the key to preventing burnout is making sure that you balancing stress, because we need stress. We need stress to be set where we are now, talking about these things and doing the things that we're doing. But we also need to be making sure that we're managing it with proper rest and with everything else that our brains need to be performing at their optimum.
You were obviously in the police for 10 years. 10 years, you said?
16.
16 years. But at this point, then you get to the stage where something's not quite right. You collapse at work. I'm interested in that period after. You said you were getting, you're having to see like psychiatric doctors and stuff like that. Is that a normal thing when you have burnout to have to go down that route, or? Yeah,
because at the time they were it was all CPTSD, PTSD, and like I said, the first lot of the focus was on these particularly unpleasant jobs I dealt with leading up to it. So they're focusing purely on that.
Okay.
So yeah, and it was a stress-related sort of absence. So they're looking at sort of trying to manage it.
I think you said something important. It's not a normal, especially in that line of work. So do we know what's being done now to support other police officers or other people out in the?
Yeah, there's a lot of work. But again, what I'd say with stress is stress doesn't care why you're stressed. It can be deadlines. It can be massive workloads of what you guys do. It can be managing the teams that you manage and having the and all that sort of stress. Or it could be what the police do. Going in and dealing with the situations that they deal with the workloads they got. Sure. That can be the military with everything they've gone through with their massive traumas that they'll experience. Yeah. Your body doesn't differentiate between that. So there's no hierarchy of stress. Stress is stress. Full stop. So and that's a big thing I think a lot of guys also need to understand. That it's not so much about the industry, it's just managing stress, full stop.
This episode of Building Minds is brought to you and sponsored by the multi-award-winning construction company Evolution Development Southwest. Evolution Development Southwest are your one-stop shop, whether it be for a garden fence or a 10-story renovation. Please check them out at evolutiondevelopments.co.uk.
Just to lead on Chris's question a bit, then, like obviously you informed the police that you had a burnout incident, things like that. What elements did they put in place then to support you, or what have they done to support other officers?
Yeah, I can't fault I can't fault the response straight away. I had because obviously at the time the focus had been on the incidents that I dealt with. Sure. So I had what we call a TRIM sort of process come in place. That's when they sit down with you and it's like a post-traumatic sort of debrief with what's gone on. What I managed to do was top out on everything on that one when I was assessed on that.
So there was an element of PTSD there?
and it's very, very similar. And I like I say, because PTSD is also massive periods of stress, stress that just can't be managed. And what was really evident with me was that, like I say, nothing had changed in the 16 years I've been policing. I was still dealing with the same sort of incidents that the police deal with. There's nothing unique about the stuff I dealt with. But what was unique was just that creeping burnout. And the reason I say look at the last 10 years is that burnout whispers years before it shouts. And the key for me, looking back on it, and there were key moments I could see where I was moving through the burnout stages, that if I'd made some really basic, simple sort of changes then, I wouldn't have ended up where I was then. And that's been the focus of the work I do when I go into businesses and talk. When I work with people that are struggling, we really focus on what those whispers look and sound like, and how to take action then, not waiting until you're literally, like I said, having medical episodes or needing time off work. Because by the time you got to that point, the solutions aren't simple, and they're not ones you can manage yourself. You're going to need external support.
So that sort of leads on then to obviously it's construction-based mental health podcast here. We're trying to break the stigma, challenge the norm with things like that. A lot of people in the industry are either self-employed, so when they do have a mental health issue, they might not be able to work for 6 months, but then that also stops people from speaking out and talking about it. Yeah. We said some figures in the last episode is, there's 2.1 million people working in the construction industry, and stats show that 1.9 million suffer with mental health. Yeah. But how many of them have actually reached out or said, I'm going to burn out in a minute, I need to take some time here, but they don't, because if they're self-employed, they have to work to earn money. So I think for me then is how can our viewers, our listeners, anybody who pays attention to this podcast take something from yourself, Zane, in terms of to stop them from burning out? Yeah,
and again, it really is about doing the work on those whispers, understanding what they look and feel like, and not just pushing through them. Because like you said, especially the self-employed guys and girls out there, you're it. If you can't turn up to work in the morning, you're not getting paid. And that pressure is immense. And the other thing you touched on, which is really important as well, is that being okay not to be okay. Because obviously, when you're pitching for work and the rest of it, reputation's a massive thing, and you don't want people to think that you're not reliable. You don't want to think that you're going to be paying a lot of money for a contract, and you want it to be done, not that it's going to be So it really is about looking after yourself and doing the work. When you're well, making sure that your foundations are in place, so that you're not ending up in the situation that I did, or that a lot of the guys and girls that we know have found themselves in.
Talk to me about those whispers.
Right. So, any change, what you need to be doing is you need to find your bench, your benchmark. You need to find and understand what perfect and really good health, mentally and physically, looks and feels like for you, not for some bloke on the gram, doing all the stuff that they do, but what looks and feels right for you. And then using that as a benchmark for when things start changing. And the big things to be watching out for when it starts tipping over into stage 3 burnout, and I talk a lot about that with my work, is the first one is physical changes. So when we start talking about sleep, we start talking about gut health. So with that, but the other one as well that you'll only notice yourself is rumination and procrastination. They are the two. So some people, are awful anyway with it. They struggle, when they're fine. But it's when that changes, when you start procrastinating more. Okay. When rumination, when you start playing stuff over, and you're not, because what happens is with your brain, when your brain's healthy, it's able to make sense of that. So it's able to, you've had an awkward conversation with someone, something's gone wrong. You're able to go, well, you're able to sit down, have a moment, think about it. Right, okay, that happened because of that, and that. That's understandable. Filed. Yeah, you can do it. And then you're not. But it's when that comes back and you're still mulling it over, and your brain doesn't have the ability to file it away and pack it away. That's probably the big one you need to be focusing on, and that's something only you will know. That won't be evident to anybody else. But that's probably the one big warning sign I can probably give guys and girls out there.
So for an employer like Jake, let's say, what signs can he look out for when it comes to his employees?
The other one as well is emotional regulation. So if you've got guys who are getting a lot shorter, but again, some guys are just awkward. That's just who they are. Yeah. And if so you manage that your own ways. You've got your own process for that. But if someone starts getting more awkward, timekeeping. Like I said, with burnout, time blindness is a massive thing. But also if someone starts going quiet, if they're a bit of a character on site and, they're all of a sudden they're starting to get a bit withdrawn.
Yeah.
If they're usually quite opinionated about how things should be done and they're usually spot on if they're good employees, but if all of a sudden they're not sort of so happy to put themselves forward and just sort of let stuff happen, just start looking out for those. So changes in how they are as opposed to anything big.
Do you think, Jake, for you, it's obviously you've had a business now for a little over a year now. Do you think sometimes there might be times where you have employees that you look at and you go, okay, something's not quite right, but I don't know why? Yeah,
100%. There's people who might be my employees, but then there's also people who I know within the industry that is happening to.
Yeah.
I think most definitely. And I just want to go back to where you said about procrastinating and stuff. I think that is such a popular thing in construction, purely because there's so many factors that you can overthink, i.e., if you're doing it wrong, for one.
Yeah.
What's the customer's opinions? Are they going to pay me? You've got building control on your case. Is the planning permission done? This has happened. I need to solve this. Or I've done that, but it's due to rain this afternoon. I'm under pressure. Yeah. I think, there's so many elements, isn't there, that, especially in our industry, that people procrastinate on to lead them to a point. I do it all the time. I do it literally all the time. I'll get into bed most nights and my wife's like, what are you thinking about? And I'm like,
how long you got?
How long you got? And also, I don't really know. I'm just constantly just going through my head, like, I got to do this or I got to do that. Oh, right, such and such is at this job. Right, we got to sort that there. Right, this is going really well here. That's a positive. I think it's really important to make clear. But then it's like you said, it's just you. 1 minute you think yourself, I've mastered it here, I'm feeling really good, and then it could be the littlest thing as like an email to come through or a text message, and then you're back to square one. I think is really clear. And
I think, sorry to jump in, I think for yourself, Joe, I think you really struggle to regulate your emotions.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say, and maybe that is an element of burnout, I don't know. But I can speak to you 1 minute and you're happy as Larry. 20 minutes later, I speak to you on the phone. I'm so stressed, I've got so much on, blah, 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 blah. And it's just that.
It is a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's hard to catch you at that point where there's like a middle ground. That bench, I suppose you want to call it.
Yeah.
You're either up or you're down.
Yeah, exactly that. And like we said just before we started recording, is I actually feel like I'm coming to a point where I'm going to have a burnout at some point.
Yeah.
And then listening to what you just said then, it's like procrastinating, emotions changing, stomach issues, things like that. It's like some of them elements that I've actually gone through myself over the past sort of couple of weeks, and I'm thinking, I'm going to lead to a burnout, do you know what I mean? So it's identifying that, which is really useful. But then at the same time, I really enjoy what I do. And Chris is right. Like, he rang me, it was last sort of Thursday, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah.
And he said, how are you doing? He's like, you sound a bit down. I said, mate. I said, I just had a hell of a day over it. I said, come to the office about 12, we'll grab a coffee and talk through it. He rang me back about an hour later and he said, do you want me to come out? I said, no, don't worry about it. I'm all good now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it literally is like that with me at the moment.
And sometimes it's just about giving yourself permission to feel like shit, actually. And not trying to, and it gets a little bit of tips and a little bit of psychology here, but when you've got those feelings passing through you, instead of trying to fight them, just let them. Well, I'm going to feel shit for another 5-10 minutes. I'm going to have a
ride that wave.
Ride the wave, because it's going to precipitate. It's not going to stay forever. The longer you try and hang on to it, the more it stays. Actually, it's been a tough week. Let's just, I'll give myself 10 minutes.
This episode of Building Minds is brought to you by TradePal. TradePal is a comprehensive marketing organisation to support those construction companies and ultimately businesses in the wider spectrum. Now, TradePal empowers trade businesses with tailored marketing solutions and essential support services to boost growth and professionalism. Now, if you have any inquiries, please check them out at tradepal.co.uk.
I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they rang me they're doing a job for me, and a subcontractor who's come on to do an external job for me. And he rang me, he said, "Oh, we got this issue and this issue. Can you help me get it sorted?" And straight away I was like, oh, another one. Like, hang on, like pressure's on now. I need to get such and such from here, put them there, fix this, fix that. And it was a Monday morning, and I said to him, "Do you ever sit there on a Sunday and think, oh, what the hell are we doing this for?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, I think you do it in every job." He was like, "But at the end of the day, Jake," he was like, "what can we do?" He was like, "It is what it is. You just gotta get on with it. And if somebody's not happy, they're not happy. But that's the issue at the end of the day. If you can't meet that deadline because of X, Y, and Z, then it's fine.
Yep.
If this issue arises, but you can do X, Y, and Z, and it might cause a day or 2 day delay, it's fine. Yeah. You're still fixing it." And I was like, "You're so right." I was like, because, you know, sometimes I am like that. I'm like, "Oh no, got this issue now," and I'm just at the same time, I'm like, "Well, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it."
What do I always say to you? Try not to worry about the things that are not in your control.
Yeah, exactly that.
Because if they're not in your control, you're worrying for nothing.
Yeah. But again, if your brain's burnt out and you're exhausted, you're not able to take. You haven't got that capacity to take that step back and have that conversation with yourself, because you just. What also happens is when your brain gets to that point, like I say, all your ability to rationalise and contextualise and all that sort of stuff just goes.
Sure.
And what does, it falls back onto your chimp part of your brain. Your and all you're operating on is your stress responses. So your fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Yeah. And fawning is one that you need to be aware of as well as a boss with guys. We all know about fight and flight. Yeah. They're your sort of adrenaline, sort of all the rest of it. But fawning is when people just won't fight back, when they're just going to agree to anything just to get out of that situation because they don't have the energy to fight their corner. And so a lot of times where people fall over is when they put their hand up and they say, "Look, I'm struggling," and then all this help and support comes around them. Sometimes it's not the right support and help, and they know that, but they also just don't have the ability to be able to sort of to fight their corner.
I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah,
you get a Tesco Express. You have your 2 steaks. What's the process after that? Talk me through that timeline.
Did you put them on the barbie or did you fry them?
No, mate, it was February, so they went on the oven. But yeah, so then it was literally just sat down, and for the first time, everything was switched off. My mind wasn't racing. I sat there and just went, I just felt everything just doing that. And then literally an hour later, I was up in bed and slept for about 12 hours. And woke up for the first time feeling fresh, feeling rested. And then what happened was Boris jumped on the tally and locked everything down. So I was literally left on my own for as long as I was.
Wow.
Did you feel like you got worse then during that?
No, it was.
Or did you feel like a bit relieved, like, oh, I can sort of spend a bit of time sorting
I wasn't having to get in the car and go off to appointments. I wasn't having, and for me, I'm a little bit of an introvert, so for me it was actually quite nice being able to finally have that time just to try and work things out myself.
Right,
so,
okay.
But then I obviously went back to work about 2 months later, and it was like, one of these zombie apocalypse movies. The job I'd left and the job I went into, sort of policing the lockdown, was a whole other, and that was quite nice actually, because what it meant was that most of the stuff we were dealing with had been put on hold, and we were just focusing on that. So there wasn't the complexity of policing that we normally have. So I had quite a basic sort of focus when I came back, which probably helped as well.
Stopping the house parties.
Oh yeah, that was it. It was just trying to keep some sort of semblance of But yeah,
no, I think like you just said, it sort of fell at a good point then, that sort of lockdown for yourself, because you managed to spend a bit of time on yourself. But then for me, that's great for you. But then so many people in construction during that period, really fell to the brink.
Yeah, especially if you're used to going out every day onto a site, working with your hands.
Exactly.
Yeah, being in that environment.
Yeah, it really is. And I know there's ways and means around it, and some builders, they could work outside within a certain distance, so they kept some work going. But it goes all back to like the self-employed bits within the construction industry. It's like if you haven't got the work, then it's just that added pressure. And I know the government brought out the support loans and everything else to support individuals who are self-employed.
You've then got the pressure of paying it back.
Yeah, you got all of that.
You're on catch-up after that, aren't you?
We spent a lot of time. It was interesting as the lockdown went further along. We spent a lot more time dealing with sort of the people in crisis because of that very reason.
Sure.
I don't know if you'd know the stats of this thing, but if I was to ask a question of how many individual cases have you had to go to and rescue them, help them, cut someone down, whatever, and they've probably been in the construction industry. Do you reckon you could put a number on that?
No, to be honest.
No.
Because it was, what I was doing, it was right across the industries.
Sure.
But, certainly a lot of the guys were, especially the self-employeds. And we saw a big, massive spike as well. I was also policing, 2008 when we had the financial crisis. And that had a lot of self-employed tradies really hard.
Was there patterns that you've seen? Is it predominantly males? Was it predominantly under a certain age, or
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no surprise that with self-harm, suicide, and that sort of stuff, there males are massively overrepresented. I think it's to do with coping mechanisms as well.
Sure.
It's not. I mean, I don't want to be too cliched about it, but when women are in sort of crisis, they tend to sort of reach out and talk to their best friends or their mums, or and they'll talk. And it's not even about trying to find solutions. It's be a little bit. I don't want to be just disparaging, but it's more about them looking for sympathy, but not in a it was me sort of way, but just by almost like talking therapy, by just connecting with someone and having a to and fro. What that does, it just sort of gets everything out.
Problem shared is a problem half.
Exactly that. And I talk a lot about that with my work, with the importance of having those relationships with people. Whereas men, we're more solution based. Let's fix it. There's a leak there. Let's fix it.
Yeah.
And
that's not always the answer.
No, because sometimes it doesn't need fixing. It just needs speaking about. Yeah.
Obviously, your period through the police and period now doing what you're doing. Do you think there's been a huge change in sort of the mental health, how should I put it, strategies and impact in that period? Like from 2008 when the financial crisis hit compared to now, do you think there's a lot in place for individuals?
Absolutely, yes. The biggest problem though is that while the bathrooms and the kitchens were full of the it's okay not to be okay posters, that was still being implemented very piecemeal. And I had that. I had 2 years where I came back, and during that time I had probably 5 line managers that were dealing with bits and pieces. A couple of them really got it and was spot on. And if I could pull them out and use them as best practice, I would. Another couple just didn't.
Okay.
And so when you're talking about it, it needs to be making sure that everyone's on the same page with it. Because like you say, with guys, it takes a lot to open up. And if you do, and you're being quite vulnerable, and it's not understood or it's pushed back at you, they're going to shut down. Which is why it's so important as bosses and managers to be getting it right first time, because you get one shot with a guy. If they've got to a point where they're being that vulnerable, and I was lucky enough that I had decent bosses as well, but I also saw just how poor outcomes were when bosses didn't get it. Yeah, the big thrust of the training is making sure that when we're having these conversations, it starts at the top, so that the bosses are then. Because the other thing as well is, when people are on site, they're looking to their line managers for the lead, for behaviours, for attitudes, for boundaries. So it's making sure that bosses are on board first, and then feeding everything down.
Yeah. Do you think a boss who's in their 60s and a boss who's in their 30s would deal with the situation differently?
No, people get it full stop regardless of age. I've seen young bosses, my age. No, I say young now. I'm not so young now, but certainly guys in my sort of
Yeah, the only reason I ask is because of like the culture, isn't it? Again, like for example, like I know lads in the industry, like they're in their 60s, late 60s, and then there's boys like lads who are in their 30s, 20s, who see the mental health thing completely differently. It's like the older generation.
Just get on with it.
Yeah, get on with it. Pull your socks up, lad.
Yeah,
you know
but things are different for and it's things are different now. The way the world is, it's different to what it was 30 years ago, and what worked reasonably. Because the other thing, 30 years ago, we weren't working 24/7 either. Lads are on site, but they're on site all day. Their weekends, they went home. They didn't have their phones in their pockets. They didn't have sort of contractors emailing them and all the rest of the nonsense. They had a weekend where they were playing sports. Sports clubs were rammed.
100%.
Sports clubs were rammed. Pubs were rammed. People on Sundays were cutting grass, fixing cars, and that was their time to recharge. Whereas we don't get that now.
No, and I try to encourage that so much in my company. Unless we are strapped on time, and lads, can you work the weekend? Yeah, that's fine. But the majority of the time, I'm like, right, boys, we're finishing at 4:30. Go home, spend time with your family. We start at 8, and on a weekend, I don't want anybody to work. Like that's your time, and it's my time. Like I think that's so important to stress. It's just there's just so many like questions and things you think of based around it, and it's just like.
And it's how they're spending their time as well.
Yeah.
The next big thing is going to be these things in our pockets.
Sure.
There's a lot of very, very clever people being employed to work out how to keep us on those devices and in with their products. What it's doing is we need to be bored. Our brains need to have periods where there's nothing going on, and we are forced to come up with stuff to do ourselves, and that's been taken away from us at the moment.
Do you think, like, obviously Denmark, Sweden, them sort of countries, they've brought in like 3-day weeks or 4-day weeks,
3-day
and stuff like
weekends.
that, Do you think that would be beneficial here in the UK?
I don't know. It's all industry specific. If you think that you're going to get the same amount of work out of lads on a 4-day week that you would a 5, then it's, because like so when you're laying blocks, If you've got to get X amount of blocks down, it's what it is.
Do you think though it gives individuals that time to relax a little bit more, spend time with the family, friends?
Yes, if they use the time properly.
Yeah.
So the countries I've spent a bit of time up in Scandinavia, I've got some good friends up there, and things are very, very different up there with how they are and how they are with each other and how they operate as a society. So it's not so much just give everybody 4-day weeks. It's also make sure that during those 3 days are off, they're making use of that time.
Yeah.
And going out. And like I say, phone is switched off. They've got everything else going on. And it's not about rest per se. It's about having a break from thinking about what's going on at work. So, talking before we started recording, you talk about how you need to be busy. And some people, the last thing you want to say to them is go and lay on the beach for a week because, within 2 days, they're literally, champing at the bit and need to be doing something.
My partner, we're getting married in May, and we talk about honeymoon ideas. And she would love to go to Maldives for 3 weeks, lie on the beach, do nothing. Wow. Whereas for me, that feels like hell.
Yeah.
I can't do that. That's like, oh my God, I'll be bored out my face after 3 days. Take me to like a busy city like Tokyo or somewhere like that, where I'm doing things, seeing things. The thought of just lying there for so long, of course I'd do it for her, maybe not for 3 weeks because I'd pull my own hair out. But you can talk, mate. But I suppose I want to focus the time that we have left really on, I suppose, how we can help and how we can support our employees and colleagues and so on and so forth. So is there any techniques that you can maybe demonstrate with us or talk to us about now that, if we recognize signs of burnout, of course we can put them in your direction, but for the listeners and for the audience, people tuning in, can you give us a little sneak peek of sort of techniques that we can share with individuals or advice we can give to them?
Yeah, like I say, it's basic rest and self-care, and it's working out what rest and self-care looks like for you. It's not about being selfish, but it's also just about working out what you need to do to recharge and being intentional about it. Because most of what we do is on autopilot. How we move around the house, how we make our breakfast, when we go to work, the conversations we have with our partners, with our work colleagues, all those things are pretty much on autopilot. Sometimes it's about breaking those patterns and getting something different in there. So weekends, if your weekend not the same as the last weekend, the weekend before that, try and do something different. Get yourself out and start breaking stuff up. Because what that does, it breaks those patterns and forces your brain to stop and switch to different parts of your brain to start working stuff out. So there's some really good work around everyday adventure and changing things up. And and again, it's no different to if former professional athlete, mate. You know that if you are going to the gym doing the same exercise day after day after day, after a while you're not getting any gains. You need to be breaking things up, trying different exercises, but being intentional with it. Trying to make sure that your weekend doesn't look the same as the last weekend does. And that's you'd be very, very surprised at just how well that works.
Interesting. And you've obviously suffered from burnout yourself, and you're at this point now where you are a burnout prevention coach, specialist, shall we say? What does that look like on a day-to-day for you, though?
Coming along here, talking to guys like yourself, sort of getting the message out there and really pushing the message that's all about prevention. So I go into businesses, I'll run workshops with teams, so working with either senior management teams or coming in and talking to the workplace as a whole, depending on what sort of capacity they've got for that. I do one-to-one coaching, so I take business leaders away for a day, and we go away somewhere quite spectacular and just unpack everything. We look at what's going on, because a big thing we also need to be thinking about is that what drives us in our 20s tends to break us in our 40s.
Sure.
So, and we talk about rest and self-care being the key to preventing burnout, but the key for long-term prevention for burnout is growth. And it's understanding that you need to be continually changing things up and having those reassessments. So for me, it's taking teams away, but also taking senior leadership teams away from their workplace as well, and coming away for days with that. There's some keynote speaking with that, sort of pushing the message out there.
Do you have an industry that you feel like you attract more?
It just depends where I'm speaking. Some days you'll be in talking to law or accountancy, and you find that that's the rabbit hole you go down. But what's really interesting is, but every industry you go into, they all tell you that things are really stressful, but every industry has its own stresses.
Sure.
Yeah. So people sort of say, coming from policing, it must have been horrendous. So, well, no different to what's going on with your industry. So that's been the thing I've taken away from it, is that there's just the commonality of burnout. It's not big, it's not clever. And once you deal with it properly, it can be quite effective to square away.
For me, I think it's really important topic, isn't it? And if you're a business out there now and you're looking at signs of your colleagues, then please obviously get in contact with Zane. Get him working with your teams, your senior leadership team, because what I've learned today, I think, is really important. And you almost self-consciously are already doing it, aren't you? Like I think as a boss, you need to know your individuals that work for you.
Yeah.
So for me, like I get to know every single one, how they work best. Is it a positive compliment? Is it a little negative kick up the arse? I don't know. So you sort of look at individuals, don't you? So I think for me is, what I'm going to take away from this most is actually, although I'm doing that, I'm going to not force a stop or a pause or a rest for that individual, but almost highlight it to them that I think that you need to just reset, take a couple of days here to get yourself together. Your job's still going to be here when you get back, but more importantly, I'm just doing this for you. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to take from it and implement.
Take a day now rather than
exactly.
Couple of
because
months
I've had incidences where, I know they're going through the mill. I've not said anything. They've come in, and then that job's had to be done twice because. That the day that they were really suffering wasn't, they just weren't on it, or it took too long.
That's it. And my old man, he's retired now, but he was a maintenance engineer, so he was running massive sort of food processing factories back in New Zealand. And like you said, the biggest stress that he had, the biggest conflict was with the management. Was you'd have these machines running and they're all rated for X amount of hours, and when those hours are up, he'd take them offline to do basic maintenance, even if they weren't. But that was But that day that was offline was there to prevent a catastrophic failure when the line was running, which would necessitate days as opposed to the one. And it's about making sure that you're taking that time when things are going well to just get that regular maintenance in, so that you're not, to avoid that catastrophic failure with the plant that you're running there. You don't wait till it sort of blows up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I suppose it's the same for individuals, isn't it? And I suppose a question I'd ask you then is, could mental health concerns and issues be from burnout? Could burnout lead to depression, anxiety, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, this is not my area of expertise. Like
Sure.
I say, and I don't want to be here. I'm not qualified to have an opinion on that. But what I would say is that sometimes it is just stuff's just got too much. If it is an underlying, psychological issue, then that's something that needs to be addressed by a professional. But what I would say is that you give yourself the best possible opportunity to not put yourself in that position by taking action early and just doing some really basic stuff to look after yourself. And if we just start calling it health as well, we don't wait until sort of with little niggles when you're playing rugby. You don't wait until things are getting to a point where you can't train.
Yeah.
You pop in, get a bit of physio, take things easy for a week while everything settles down, and then go again. So it is really about managing those little niggles when they happen, rather than waiting until you're having to, because they can develop into much more serious bits and pieces. So
Yeah, of course.
So if you could turn a clock back 20 years, what would you say to young Zane? What bit of advice would you say to young Zane?
I think just be easy on yourself. Stop putting yourself under so much pressure. Understand that, where you are and what you're doing, and you're in quite a unique situation, and don't let things drift. Have the hard conversations when you need, and that's with others, but also with yourself as well. But again, it's difficult because at the time you think you're doing the best with the information that you've got. So it would really be about just occasionally taking that step back and not having to sort of to push on when things went well.
Jake, Zane, I think it's been a great episode. It's been really enlightening for me, and I'm sure for the listeners. And I think the question that I would want everybody to think about is what I just asked: is it that we're starting to get burnt out, and these can lead to further things? So is it worth taking preventative measures and speaking to somebody before you're burnt out, before it gets to that far? Like I said, I think Jake's open and honest and said he's on his way to probably being burnt out quite quickly. And I think that leads to his anxiety and depression. I think that could be a big factor of it. But we're not experts, I understand. But Zane, I really appreciate you joining us today. Where can the people find you? How do they get in contact with you?
Really easy to find me. It's zanemccormack.com. So
Brilliant.
yeah, I'm online. The socials, LinkedIn is where a lot of my work is, and I've got a little bit of a presence on Instagram as well. But zanemccormack.com is probably the best way to get in touch with me if they want to have a chat about what I'm doing and coming in and speaking to your teams.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. If you're a business leader, please get in contact with Zane. Great guy. He can come in and help you with you and your employees and teams. Thanks, Zane, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's going to be a wrap for episode 3 of the Building Minds podcast. And until next time, thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.